Hi, everyone. It's Dr. Z, and welcome to another episode of Next Up Narcissism. Today, I have with me an extremely special guest who I have been wanting to have on this show for such a long time, and that is Dr. Charlotte Proudman. Dr. Proudman is the founder and director of Right to Equality, a nonprofit working to advance gender equality. For over a decade, Charlotte has fearlessly promoted gender equality under the law, successfully spearheading campaigns to change the law for women. Her new book, which is out May 1st, is called He Said, She Said, and I highly recommend that all of you read this book. It is so informative and so very important. In her book, He Said, She Said, Charlotte delves into the family courts using real-life cases to challenge the system to create positive change, and it is now available for pre-order. This episode is extremely important, particularly for those of you who have been through the family court system, whether that's child custody cases or experienced financial abuse through the court system. It is a necessary episode, if not for you, for somebody that you may know or care about. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Next Up Narcissism. And today I have somebody who I've been wanting to speak to for years and following on Instagram and everything that she's been doing. She's an amazing human being. Charlotte Proudman, I am so excited and honored to have you with us today to talk about just family courts, what is going on, why it's happening, what you're doing for it, and the amazing work that you have tirelessly put into helping women navigate this brutal landscape. Most importantly, though, you have, and it's out soon, May 1st, right? Your new book, He Said, She Said, which is kind of almost like a guide to this horrific landscape. I don't know how else to describe it. So I'm going to let you kind of just tell us about this book and more importantly, why you did it and what you hope that people get from it and why it's just so important right now. Just in working with my patients and talking to people, family court system has been an absolute nightmare for a very long time. And at least recently, maybe a little bit more than that, people are really starting to catch on. But what we find is that when they do catch on, it almost puts them in a more dangerous situation because we would think that the appropriate thing to do would get us the results we want. But unfortunately, in these scenarios, that's not the case. So I'm going to hand it over to you. If you can kind of talk about He Said, She Said, and what it's about, but more importantly, why it's so important for people to get.
Well, Jaime, can I first say thank you so much for inviting me onto your podcast. It really is a privilege and an absolute honour to be here. I've been looking forward to speaking with you and a long admirer of the work that you do. And I know very many of my clients in family courts, in fact, they're avid listeners to your podcast. So really thank you again for inviting me. He Said, She Said is a book that I've been writing for about 3 years, and it follows my trajectory into family courts. And I've been practicing as a family law barrister for, almost 15 years now. And I've seen all manner of different cases, so I'm sure you can imagine. But one of the key themes that comes across as a barrister in family court and is set out within my book is the systemic harm that's caused by this institution, not just in this country. When I say this country, I mean England and Wales, but also, as we know, internationally, globally, how harmful family courts are when addressing domestic abuse, rape, coercive and controlling behaviour. And I tend to see this systemic minimization of domestic abuse, with a judge, for example, describing it as just a bit of DV, or she's no shrinking violet, therefore she can't have been a rape victim. And this type of language is deplored, one hopes, in society at large. So it's almost astounding that in one of our very institutions, which upholds the law, of course, and as an arm of the state, is engaging in what some describe as court state-sanctioned abuse. And I don't say that lightly, Jaime, and you know from the work that you do, of the harm that's caused to children in being forced to have a relationship, often an artificial sometimes dangerous relationship with an abusive parent, most often a father. And the harm that causes is a consequence to the primary carer, the mother.
Yes.
And then, of course, at some point, we have to get into parental alienation.
Oh, yes. So one of the things that I always get pushback for, and I'm sure you do as well, is this notion of, and I see it here in the States all the time. And when I work with people, I specifically tell them not to say or do certain things because this kind of templated outcome that's going to occur. But this idea, and it's so insane when you think about it, as long as the parent, and in this case, usually the father, although yes, there are mothers as well, but we're gonna go with fathers because that is the research-based, fact. It's not something we're just saying. That there's this idea that as long as the parent is not abusive directly to the child, and not even that, physically and sexually abusive, forget this psychological and emotional, it's not counted. But as long as the child is not being abused directly by the parent, then everything's fine. Then custody should continue as normal, right? 50-50, whatever it is, because they're not directly harming the child. And I have had, for obvious reasons, but the fact that there are people in this institution who are supposed to be advocates, thinking that that is acceptable. We know that if you're abusing the mother of your child, that 100% directly abuses them or indirectly abuses them in the exact same way. They're watching it, they're hearing it, the mother is no longer able to provide for their child emotionally, physically, their safety in the way that they would if that abuse was not going on. And so it's completely ignored. That has always, to this day, just blown my mind. And the fact that we have to convince people of that is even just more painful, in my opinion. And to have a woman who is being abused have to explain this to an institution that's supposed to protect her is mind-blowing to me.
Well, I couldn't agree more with you. We have had a legal change in England and Wales. In fact, and more broadly in Britain, the Domestic Abuse Act came into force in 2021, and Section 3 of this piece of legislation says that children who see, hear, or experience, in essence, are in a domestic abusive household, are themselves considered victims in their own right. And that has to be right, doesn't it? So
yes.
when findings of domestic abuse are made in cases that I work on, and a mother is found, as you say, to be a direct victim, I say, well, as a consequence, the child is also a victim, whether directly or indirectly. And you have to consider the harm and damage that's going to be caused to the child in forcing them through the court to have some sort of relationship with an abusive father. It puts them, doesn't it, at risk,
yes.
physically, potentially, and emotionally. And B, when that child is older and comes to learn of, in some instances, the egregious sexual violence that a father has perpetrated against a mother,
yes.
How must they feel as an adult knowing that they've been court-ordered to build a relationship with a man who has raped their mother? Well, I can tell you, if I was in that position, I would want justice from the courts for forcing me into that position. That is, in my view, abusive, and it shouldn't be tolerated, but we see it far too often, don't we?
We do. And I also, you bring up a really good point in terms of sexual coercion. And I think that that's also something that is not recognized, at least here. I think people forget or don't even consider that just because you're married does not mean that the woman cannot be raped, because rape, by definition, they look at it as such an archaic definition, almost this very basic black and white. Was it against her will directly and saying, screaming no, it violent? And that's not it. Sexual coercion is
yes.
absolutely part of that. I'm not going, or I'm going to take your children if you don't do X, Y, and Z sexually with me. I'm going to throw you out of the house. I'm going to abuse you. I'm not going to stop screaming for 5 hours when I know you have to wake up early tomorrow. I'm going to lock you out of the bedroom. There's so many things that happen that people don't realize. And And the other thing, and then I want to get into alienation because it's such a huge topic people really misunderstand. But when it comes to coercive control, there really is, in my opinion, a lack of understanding of the damage that this does, because this is the type of abuse that we often see in these situations, because it's not a physical wound, it's not a scar, it's nothing you can see. It's very calculated and deliberate. So the way that the father presents in court is not how the father's presenting behind closed doors. And to have to explain coercive control and what's being done to you, it's designed specifically to make you look crazy, right? Because these events in isolation alone don't look, they look benign, but taken together, it paints this very big picture. And so I'm curious your thoughts and how you talk about it in your book about the impact specifically of coercive control and that form of abuse.
Yes, I mean, I think, again, you're absolutely right to make the connection between sexual violence and coercive control, because they are often one and off the same, and it's a part of a pattern of this insidious, corrosive form of coercive control, really seeping into every aspect of someone's life and controlling a woman's every movements, often how she thinks, feels, even believes. And in my book, and he said, she said, I have a chapter on rape and I have another chapter on coercive control and the way the family courts handle both. Of course, they interlink. But the rape chapter in particular, I deal with a case of Mary. And the judge said in Mary's case, and this comes back to what you were saying just a moment ago, about how difficult it is to prove rape when it's in a marriage or partnership.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's almost this assumption, if you've consented once, and of course in marriages, most people do, therefore you're consenting throughout, carte blanche check, if you like,
I love
to
that.
have sex.
I love that.
That's how
Yep.
it's seen.
Yep.
And
You're right.
in Mary's case, we challenge the fact, and I find this, I must say, inconceivable. I don't know how it is in the US, but there is no definition of rape or consent in family courts in England and Wales. Well, who does that benefit? It was the
Correct.
accused that argued against introducing a definition, and I, on behalf of Mary and another woman, argued there should be a definition. And I just to touch upon, as you say, this intersection of coercive control and sexual violence, I came across two cases which I detail in my book, and I was horrified by them. And these women showed me an informal written agreement on literally handwritten on a piece of paper, signed by both of them. And it was an agreement that these husbands had written, forcing their wives to agree to a number of terms on the basis that they had another child. And many of them included sexual terms, like having sex whenever he wants, allowing facials to happen, wearing nail polish, swallowing, absolutely deplorable forms of sexual violence and an example of modern slavery in marriage.
Mm-hmm. It's an ownership. And and here's the thing, people who have these personality constructs, that's exactly how they look at people, particularly women, as objects. They serve no purpose except for what that person needs in that moment. And when that need is met, they don't exist as a separate entity, as a separate human being with feelings and emotions. It's not, again, it's this archaic view that it is our job as wives to satisfy our husband's sexual needs, no matter what happens, no matter if we want to or not. And that view, and people listening thinking that is so ridiculous, it is. But what's even more ridiculous is that it's the view that's taken in these institutions. It's just dressed up differently.
Well, you're right, because you can, in this country, your marriage can be annulled on the basis that it was not consummated. So husband and wife did not have sex. So it shows that a marriage forms part and parcel of sex. So if a woman is not giving sex to her husband or submitting to it, it could be also a ground of divorce. I mean, I recall one particular case where the husband, and again, please, to those that are listening, do get my book so you can read this in more detail. But the husband asserted that he was a victim of coercive and controlling behaviour because he had a right to sex. And by her withholding sex, that was abusive. And that was in a context where he was facing allegations of rape. And he thought he was the victim and that his victim was the perpetrator. And the court allowed that to be litigated. They found in her favour and they did find rape, but she still had to go through that entire process.
She had to go through it. Yep.
It's extraordinary, isn't it?
So with that kind of mindset, and I know you discuss this in your book, let's talk a little bit about parental alienation, and how the courts adopt, again, this archaic view of the need for a child or children to have a relationship with both parents, and how that is what results in a healthy, psychologically healthy, physically healthy child development course. We know that is not the case. Research shows that is not the case. And I think sometimes what people forget, and before we even get into this, is that if you have a parent who is abusive, physically, sexually, manipulative, coercively controlled, whatever that looks like, that parent is not safe for that child, period, for a couple reasons. One, when you are leaving, when a woman is leaving her partner, male partner, who has that personality construct, they are going to use those children as tools for punishment against the person who left them or is accusing them. That alone makes them not safe, right? So not only are they not good parents, but they're using these children. They will say they want custody, not because they want their children. They don't want their children. They just want their spouse to not have the children, because they go after what the woman will fight for most fiercely, and that's our children. So you already have that before you even go into this. So kind of leading in with that, I want to talk about parental alienation and what it really is. And I have a lot of discussions with people about this, because even for the women, they'll say, my husband's trying to alienate my child from me, and I have to work on the verbiage with them, because that's not what they're essentially. The parental alienation definition itself has to be kept separate. Are they manipulating your children into not wanting to see you and telling them lies about you? Absolutely. But parental alienation is a legal strategy that abusive men would use to make the courts think that their ex, or whoever they're leaving, whoever they have custody of the child with, is deliberately trying to take this very good parent and keep their children from him. And that's where this comes from. And people have really just botched the definition and all of that. So I would love for you to kind of set the record straight as to what parental alienation really means and how to use it properly, and why, if this comes up in a custody battle with your ex, why this is a massive red flag and how to go about handling it.
As you say, parental alienation has become the go-to legal strategy by abusive parents. And I'm afraid there has become a legal industry involving parental alienation, with go-to lawyers that specialise in it, and of course, so-called experts.
I'm going to say it's even like a cult. It's a financial money-making cult.
And I'll talk to you a little bit about Gemma. She's a woman who I represented. Her case is in my book. She's one of very many mothers that experience these allegations that have been weaponized of parental alienation against her. And the father, as indeed very many do, say, this is a mother that's alienating my children from me. She's manipulating them, negatively influencing them such that they don't want a relationship with me. And Gemma has made false allegations of rape and domestic abuse to hurt me. Gemma, on the other hand, instructed me, and I represented her. And I said to the judge, what's happened here is that the father is using this legal strategy as a means to frighten, torment, and control her, and continue the abuse by using parental alienation. And the judge agreed. And he did find in fact, that Gemma had been raped and abused and coercively controlled by the father, and the children had been subject to abuse. And he did find that parental alienation was used by the father as a weapon. And that was a case where the father ended up with his parental responsibility limited. The children's surnames, they were given permission to change them to the mother's. He had to pay the mother over £40,000 in her legal costs, which for the family court is a significant sum of money. He was not allowed any direct contact and only has a letterbox. So that's an example of the courts getting it right. The book also, of course, provides examples where the courts have found parental alienation, notwithstanding allegations of domestic abuse. And one of the concerns that I highlight in my book, and fortunately some of the cases I've worked on, we've moved further forward, is that historically, and sometimes still today, so-called psychologists are instructed to diagnose parental alienation as if it's a psychological condition. And we know, of course, that that's a nonsense. It's not. And experts that are claiming to do that, I mean, you know better than anyone, Jaime, about this, they should be struck off, I'm afraid. It's discreditable.
It is.
They should not be opining on something that doesn't exist. It's pseudoscience. It is not a psychological condition. And diagnosing someone with something that is, they've manufactured is deeply harmful. They're using medicine not for good and for best interest, but I'm afraid for harm.
And I'll even take it one step further. I don't even think they care. I know they don't care about the harm they're causing. They're doing it because it makes them a ton of money. Period. I mean, the reunification camps that are out there, the psychologists who are hired to interview these children who should be beyond ashamed of themselves and lose their licenses, as far as I'm concerned. Who have some lost their licenses and still continue to do this. But, I don't know if people really understand what happens to the child in terms of this practice. I mean, they are taken without their consent, kicking and screaming and petrified. And there's videos of this, of them taken against their will, crossing over state lines, which you would think is kidnapping. However, it's not, because they have found a loophole where they transfer, legal guardianship in that very small moment to somebody else, where therefore it's no longer, I'm giving a very brief overview of this, where it's not considered kidnapping. Take them to a hotel by an airport by themselves, children, and have random people come in to interview them who are, quote, social workers and psychologists, to feed them and gaslight them into thinking that their healthy parent is the problem. And when you have an 8-year-old, 10-year-old, 11-year-old who is petrified without their healthy parent, going into a relationship with their abusive parent, being told that their view of everything is completely wrong and inaccurate. And then they're only supposed to be gone for 3 days, but it ends up being 3 months, 3 years, and there's no action. There's no way that this can be reversed. I mean, this is how horrible it is. I'm not sure people really understand what that means. So when I have clients tell me that they want to do a psychological evaluation on so-and-so, or they're bringing up reunification therapy, it's a hard no. I would rather them go through a different process than go that route, because they make it sound like it's going to work out in the woman's favor, but it does not and will not.
I mean, you're right to say as well at the beginning when you mentioned that mothers also can experience, I wouldn't call it parental alienation, because I think it's a very loaded term. I think it's highly contentious. I don't agree with the origins of that, which we know is from Richard Gardner, a discredited psychologist in the US who's now dead, who appeared to sympathise with paedophiles. And as a result of many transfers of residence, he caused emotional harm to children, some even taking their own lives. So I do not accept that label at all. I entirely reject it. But there are examples, and I'm working on cases that are live today, and some that are again in my book, and he said, she said, where mothers have had their children turned against them by abusive fathers. And it's not a one-off. It's not as if, well, he's just suddenly decided to turn the kids against him in a way in which fathers claim mothers do because they're vindictive or manipulative, playing on those gender tropes. No, in these cases, which are, in my view, quite often genuine, and don't get me wrong, are often outliers as well. When they do happen, though, it's part of a pattern of behaviour. So that you'll have seen the domestic abuse in the relationship. And then once a woman has escaped, which as we all know is the most dangerous time, the only weapon of control he has left is the children. And he tries to isolate the children from the mother, and little by little, drip, drip effect, slowly erode their relationship. And I've seen children as a result suffer mental health issues like being expelled from school, suffering suspensions, having breakdowns, anxiety, depression, because they can't quite reconcile why it is they are regurgitating a narrative of hating their mother when their experiences of their mother are not grounded in reality or fact. And it's very difficult to decipher those cases, as it seems for the court, from fathers who allege PA. To me, it's not.
Correct.
But to the court and the family court professionals, they struggle.
I agree. And I think you bring up a really important point, that it's part of a pattern of coercive control and abuse over a long period of time. They are not going to just all of a sudden, out of nowhere, keep these children from their healthy parent. And you know, here's the other thing to keep in mind. And this, I make a blanket statement about this. Absolutely no healthy parent, I don't care how bad the divorce is, I don't care how bad whatever happened, whatever the case may be, but any healthy parent will never keep their children from another healthy parent, no matter what their marriage. Even if it was them, you can have a toxic divorce, but not have it be an abusive divorce, right? I mean, sometimes things don't work out for whatever reason. It could be a horrible divorce, but not this. This is a different beast. And so you bring up such an important point about the pattern and being able to observe that pattern, because I guarantee you, you will rarely find any parent all of a sudden taking the kids and holding them against the other parent. It wouldn't happen.
No.
Because that's not what healthy parents do.
No. And but let me just say this very clearly. I mean, I'm sure your listeners don't need me to say this, but some people do. I strongly believe that children should be cared for by both parents. In fact, I'm an advocate for fathers stepping up and taking an active, sometimes even more than an equal role. They provide a valuable role and sense of identity and meaningful, secure bond and attachment with their children. And I believe even fathers should be made sometimes by family courts to do their fair and equal share. Of course, family courts don't order them to do that, do they? But they order mothers to take their kids to contact. The irony of that is not lost on me. But my concern in my book, He Said, She Said, Truth, Trauma and Struggle for Justice in Family Court, is what happens when that relationship is abusive and the family environment is so chaotic and dangerous it leaves children and women at risk of harm. That's my concern. It's not for the parents that are safe and are healthy. In the vast majority, 99% of my cases are all domestic abuse. People don't make applications to family court lightly, cost them thousands of pounds, years of litigation. They go through the trauma of often giving evidence, everything about their lives being raked over by strangers, being villainized, gender tropes thrown at them. Look, it's not an easy ride. People don't do that lightly.
Nope. No. And listen, I'm glad you said that, because I think it may seem like a no-brainer to you and I, but I think it is important that you say that to people, because, yes, ideally both parents, healthy parents, should be contributing. And you said sometimes not 50-50, right? Sometimes more for the father. The key difference is the pattern of abuse. And I agree with you completely on all of that, that the ideal situation is both parents. Period. So this leads me into my other question. With it being something that shouldn't be, but is so hard to convey in family court, what are some of the reasons that this even exists in the first. Why is it so difficult? What are the variables at play that make this so difficult to just not be so obvious?
What is it that makes it so difficult not to be obvious? The understanding of the dynamics of parental alienation and or actually coercive control. I think it is the gendered element behind it, because I think that those myths that women manipulate, they lie, they're conniving, they're scorned women, that she's no shrinking violet, she can give as good as she gets, it's six of one, half a dozen of the other. This type of language we hear in court. My book's called He Said, She Said, because I hear that all the time in court. He said one thing, she said another. What are you going to do? Shrug your shoulders. Well, actually, what you're going to do is deal with these allegations very carefully and deal with them seriously and take a careful risk-assessed approach. But I think that the family courts, as I say in my book, really struggle. And part of that struggle as well is the lack of training in respect of domestic abuse and coercive and controlling behaviour. We still don't know what, if any, training full-time, part-time judges and magistrates receive in respect of domestic abuse, trauma, memory. And I think until those issues are addressed, coupled with training for family court professionals and indeed lawyers, don't think we're going to see any significant shift. That's my fundamental worry, that these issues, sexism and misogyny and victim blaming, are going to continue to play out.
You know, it's interesting. Tina Swithin from One Mom's Battle, she is just fierce with this, and I just adore her. And
she's awesome.
Amazing.
She's absolutely awesome. Hats off to her.
Yeah.
Credit her all the way.
Tried. I mean, she has these trainings available. And we were talking once about this, about the amount of people that refuse free training.
Yeah.
And, you know, and I was not surprised, but still just as horrified, because it just really shows you people's unwillingness to let go of these archaic preconceived notions that they have that's within these court systems and the misogyny, and to let go of that. They're more scared to let go of that because they lose power than they are to actually see what's in front of them and the pain and the harm that this is causing and this trickle-down effect through the families. And it's just, what do you know, as a professional in this exact arena, what do you say to that?
I must say, I find it extremely frustrating that it's not just us dealing with that over here in the UK, but that you're dealing with it as well over in the US. And we know in Australia, it's a similar issue in other European countries. And I think it's an issue everywhere, in fact. And I know from, you know, examples of women's charities, some who are very well trained in domestic abuse have attempted to offer, as you say, free training to the judiciary. And it's either been met with lip service or declined, or we don't know what's happened because we're not given any information about it, because it's all private and very much secret from our judicial college, which I think is such a great shame, because providing that information would actually instill greater confidence, public confidence, in a family justice system which is supposed to meet the needs of the public and, importantly, vulnerable children. But there is one issue that I deal with in my book, and that is child sex abuse. And I don't know if it's the same in the US, I'm sure it is. But I think that child sex abuse allegations are probably one of the biggest forms of injustice that our family courts have ever been part of, I suppose, is probably the most diplomatic way I can put it. In the vast majority of cases that I've seen, over 95%, I would say, go as high as that again, no findings are made of child sex abuse. So if child will say, disclose, my father has sexually abused me, they might say that to third parties, nursery teachers, even social workers, family friends, display sexualized behavior. And then the response from the father is the mother must have coached them to say that. And then that again becomes the parental alienation narrative to explain away those disclosures. And my concern is how children are seen as unreliable witnesses, that they don't have accurate memories or even false memories, and the gaslighting that's happening to children, such that the family courts are potentially responsible for damaging a generation of children that have disclosed CSA and then being forced to live with their alleged abusive fathers, or have regular contact with them. And I know at least in a couple of cases, because those victims have contacted me, where they've been forced to have contact with their fathers, they've gone on to continue the abuse under a court order.
Yep. Of course, because like you said before, and I'll keep saying this, it's a pattern. Period. Yeah. Patterns will repeat themselves if there is no intervention, if there is no remorse, empathy, or willingness to change on the part of the abuser. And when there's no awareness of it, and this is where it comes in. Well, if it was that bad, why didn't they say something? If it was that bad, why didn't they leave? This is why. They're not heard, they're not listened, they're not supported by the institutions that are supposed to protect them. This is why, right? And they're scared. I mean, women, and you said it before, women are scared to leave because that time when they leave is the highest rate of violence for them and the children. I mean, and after they leave, it's not like the abuse stops in these situations, right? And that's, again, part of the pattern. A toxic divorce, once it's done, both people like, oh, thank God, it's over. We can move on, date, do our thing. Kids can be happy. We're in separate houses. Great. With this, that is not the case. It is continued. The legal abuse that occurs, the draining of their finances, the stalking behavior that occurs, using children as pawns. You're going to see this post-separation abuse over and over and over again. Why would sexual abuse be any different? It wouldn't.
Yeah, quite. I think it's also, what's probably particularly harrowing, I think, about the child sex abuse is the fact that even children are disbelieved. You've got women that are disbelieved, and then children's voices are ignored to the extent that they will suffer that lifelong gaslighting and sometimes victim blaming.
That's right.
And I really struggle to reconcile that our state institutions are doing that to children who will later become adults. And I hope that in due course there will be an inquiry into how family courts address child sex abuse and private law children proceedings, because I'm deeply worried by the children that are being failed. And, I have to say I have seen it myself. It's in my book. Yeah. He said, she said, it's there. It's in black and white. People can disagree if they wish, but those are children's voices. And I think to suggest that mothers have implanted these memories in children or have coached them to say that, there would have to be something deeply wrong with the mother, sadistic. And these are mothers without any mental health issues, any psychological conditions, which will have psychological assessments, and they'll still say the same.
Yes.
They might use some gendered language, but to say that a mother has gone that far, really?
Particularly when there's no other behaviors that come before that are that sick.
Yeah. Well, like you say, it's a pattern of behavior. Well, where is the pattern on her part? In some of these cases, the CSA comes about after domestic abuse or the forms of coercive control, breakdown of a marriage, etc. And yet we don't see those same kind of sadistic, malevolent behavioural traits from the mother, which is a pattern of behaviour. All of a sudden, well, she must have coached the children. And then it's jumped on, it becomes a narrative, and it's endorsed by the court.
That's right. It's for people listening who are saying no, yes, right?
Yes.
This is exactly why we're having this discussion, because I needed people to hear what you see, what you deal with, what's in your book, He Said, She Said, and why you wrote it in the first place. I mean, this is it. Well, I don't want to speak for you, but I guess from when you set out to write this book, what is in a perfect world, what was your hope that people would get from this? What was your hope that you would be able to change with this in terms of this institution in general?
I mean, look, it's not a light-hearted read, but I do hope that people will find that this is inspirational. It's inspirational because I think it lays bare what happens behind closed doors in the secrecy of family courts. which very many people do not get a glimpse of, and they are the lucky ones. And those that go through it are not able to speak about their experiences and what's happened to them. So this is about honouring the voices of women and children that have suffered. And it's about making their cases and putting them at the heart and forefront of policy change, because they can't speak. So I, as their barrister and their advocate, do it on their behalf. And I strongly believe I have a commitment and I have a duty to do that for them and for other women and children that may in the future be affected by family court. It's a call to action that has suggestions for policy change and legal change. But before we get there, before I think we get to those changes, we have to show that there's an issue in family court, and we have to put that on the political agenda. And we can do that by writing, by speaking, by raising awareness in a way that mums that are suffering can't. And that's why I wrote it, Jaime. And I hope that other people will buy it. They'll read it. You can buy it, those that are international, from Primrose Hill bookshops. You can buy it from there, and they will ship it to you internationally, wherever you are in the world. So, you know, I do encourage people to log on and to buy it. You can attend as an online event next week, which I'd welcome, of course, listeners to attend, with a journalist, Louise Tickle, Kate Knifton, a former member of Parliament who I represented. She was a victim of rape, domestic abuse and coercive control, and hear from those firsthand.
Wonderful. And I'll link all of these to the show notes, the invitation to log on, where we can buy the book. And then where can people find you and your amazing work that you do?
Thank you. You can find me at Dr. Proudman, all one word, and that's my handle. You can find me on Instagram, TikTok, and X, as it was Twitter. I'm quite an avid user of Twitter as well. And of course, Instagram. I have my website, www.charlotteproudman.com, and my chambers that I work from is Goldsmith Chambers, where I practice from London, representing women all over the country.
Wonderful. Charlotte, thank you so much. Like I said, I've been looking forward to this for so long. You are helping so many people. You are an amazing person, and the work you do, just thank you. And I know that a lot of people that I work with follow you, listen to your advice. And like I said, you're just doing amazing things. So thank you. It was an honor to speak with you, and I hope that we can do it again soon. And everybody who's listening, please get her book, He Said, She Said. And again, I will post the links in the show notes and on Instagram for everybody.
Thank you so much. As I say, it's been a real privilege to speak with you. Thank you for all that you do for women, mothers, children, and family courts and beyond. And for those that are listening, thank you for taking the time and care to tune in. And please do share our work with other people and share the good word.
Thank you so much. Everybody have a good day. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Next Up Narcissism. I hope you found it useful, but most importantly, I hope you found it validating. Want to work one-on-one with me? Visit my website at drjamiezuckerman.com to book a personalized coaching session, and be sure to check out my on-demand workshops on topics like co-parenting with a narcissist, life after leaving, anxiety management strategies, and more. Again, that's drjamiezuckerman.com. You'll also find links to my interactive workbooks, merchandise, resources, and newsletter sign up. Next Up Narcissism is as much your podcast as it is mine. I want to hear your feedback and what you want to hear. So make sure to leave a podcast review wherever you listen, or send an email to nextup@drjamiezuckerman.com. Again, that's nextup@drjamiezuckerman.com. Be sure to subscribe so that you never miss an episode. And as always, thank you so much for listening. Make sure to tune in next week to see what's up next on Next Up Narcissism.